because of the people that I work with and some of the stories that you folks have shared, even in terms of how we first got reunited a few years ago, that we're all just so tangled up inside. Sometimes we wonder how we're going to make it from one day to the next. Our mothers are sick and infirmed, and they wished, some of them, that they didn't have another day, you know. And when we see that, it tears our hearts out. I've been there with my folks too. I just don't know what it is about life, but there's always something that seems like it's got its nets around our heart, and it's squeezing. And so today I wanted to talk about what is it that tangles us up, and how do we get free? I think, for me, the thing that tangles me up, and I think tangles us up more than anything, is fear. Are you afraid of getting old? Are you afraid of being able to walk? Are you afraid of being able to stand? Are you afraid of not being able to think clearly anymore? Those fears tangle me up, and I'm only 62. I know that sometimes those nets get wrapped around your heart more powerfully than I can imagine. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been brought back together, so we can help each other a bit with that. When my mom and dad started their decline, we didn't know it, but Dad was having the beginning stages of Alzheimer's, probably in their mid-70s, and Mom was having a series of mini strokes. And I remember visiting home. I'd go home every other weekend for about, lasted a long time. It was years and years to help with them before they went into assisted care, and even then. I remember one time Mom had something like the flu. It was in the winter. And she was sitting in her stuffed easy chair watching TV, and she had a comforter wrapped around her to keep warm. And Dad was over in his chair, and I was on the couch. And Mom said, Frank, I think I'm going to be sick, as she had been many times that week. That meant she'd be puking on the comforter and all of that. Dad said, Barb, get to the bathroom, now, now. And with her limited thinking, because of all the strokes, she froze. She couldn't process how to move or get her feet going or even how to get out of the chair. And she threw up on her comforter, and Dad started yelling at her that he was going to have to wash the comforter. He was going to have to figure out a way to get it dry. And as I sat there, really, you are every age you've ever been. I may have been 52, but I was really 13 at that moment. And I was just so angry at him for talking to her that way, so meanly. She's had strokes, she's getting sick. And I thought, what the? And so I came home, went to church the next Sunday, and was telling, what a great name, her nickname is Smuggles. She's a retired nurse. Smuggles Culver, a British lady with a cool accent. I was telling her about this story because I knew she'd understand. I said, so what do you think? And she said, well, she surprised me. She said, I think as your father's son, you needed to take him for a walk. You get it? He was overwhelmed. He was all tangled up in his net, just like that whale at sea, afraid of going down, afraid of not being able to survive. And as his thinking processes were going with his Alzheimer's, just washing and drying a comforter was more than he could figure out how to get his mind around. Fear wraps itself around us when we get older, and we're afraid we're not going to make it. I see a couple over in Norwich. They've given me permission to tell their story. Kathy's mom had a long bout with Alzheimer's, and by the end, she didn't know where she was or who she was. And so Kathy, who's now 70, is terrified of having Alzheimer's. She's in her mid-70s now. And when it first started coming on, she didn't want to admit it. And that's kind of what brought them back to see me, because they were fighting a lot. And every time Ken would say, I just told you that, that would light a fuse, and she'd blow up at him. Because what she heard was, I'm descending into hell where my mom went. And what he was saying was, I'm afraid of losing you. Please don't lose your memory. We saw what happened to your mom. And so she fought it, and with a lot of work and counseling, she was able to finally admit what her fears were, and that she probably did have this. She knew it. And once she could admit that she had it, she wasn't so terrified, because then we could work with it. If you've got something inside that you're afraid of and you won't admit that you have it, it's like putting a beast in that closet. You hear it knocking on the door and scratching and clawing and scares you even more. But once you admit that you have it, you bring it out and you tame it and you can work with it. Carl Jung, who was a contemporary of Freud's, used to say, when we suppress something, when you shove it down, it goes down a kitten, but it comes out like a lion. You get it? That's what happens to your fears. And so you know what she's doing now? I've got him to join the Alzheimer's Society. It's a support group for people with Alzheimer's and their caregivers. It's a big step. They've met other people who are wrestling with the same thing. And they had a big walk at Otsenango Park a while back to raise money for Alzheimer's. Guess who spoke the opening words? This person. To talk to her, you wouldn't know, that anything was going on. And a lot of times in the first few years of dementia or Alzheimer's, you don't know. But now she says, this is me. They're setting up support groups in Norwich, the two of them, Ken and Kathy. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And because she can admit it, they can do adaptive things. They can make a huge calendar with what's going on that day in case she forgets. So one day they were sitting at the breakfast table, and Kathy says to Ken, so what's on the calendar, Ken? Tell me. He looks on the calendar and there's just a big blank. And Kathy can see that it's a big blank too, and Ken says, oh, we've got a very full day today. And Kathy said, really? I see nothing on the calendar. He said, well, today the calendar tells me that you know who I am, I know who you are, we can talk to each other, we can love each other. If all the energy we have is to sit in a chair and watch TV together, we can do that. If we have a little more energy, we can go for a walk and hold hands, we can do that. But that's what's on the calendar from now on, every day. I learn so much from my patients. Every morning when I get up and I look over at Nancy, I say to myself, that's what's on the calendar for today. All the other crap that I worry about, that tangles me up, not important. Not important. So when you want to know how to get untangled from your fears, go where the love is. Go where Jesus is. Now that love may be halfway across the country, and you may have to call that person to talk to him. But go there. That is the only thing. That's the knife that gets us uncut from the webs that tangle us up in our heart. And also know when you go through things like dementia and Alzheimer's, it's messy. It gets ugly. People blow up at each other. They explode at each other because they're depressed. That's all part of the journey, folks. All part of the journey. But if you can read it that way, it makes it a little easier to understand it. When you need help, if you want to untangle the nets, you have to be able to ask for help. I was very touched once when Sharon Roof sent me an email and said when he's struggling, they asked for help. Healthy families, which I think the Roofs are, except for Lynn's little cross-dressing problem.
You have your crosses to bear, I'll bear mine.
They ask for help. And in doing so, they start to untangle the nets by getting other hands in there to help. That's what you do. You ask for help. I see you guys like my little dogs. Don't take offense. Molly and Polly. They were abused. When I came here in 1975, I didn't know that the church had been abused, but I knew it had been neglected and that it was struggling. And I know that in the last 30-odd years, sometimes the church has been neglected, and I know it's been abused. And so I see you as people that I want to love gently and delicately and well. And sometimes I don't know how to do that, because we don't have enough time together. And other times, when I'm giving messages, I'm trying to give messages that will cut the nets from around your hearts. A couple months ago, I gave a message which for me was kind of scary, saying I didn't believe in hell. That hell was something, from my studies, that was made up by Emperor Constantine to try to coerce people into becoming Christians. That it was taken from the book of Revelations, and that book was written as a treatise against Rome. It was an allegory, it was a fable, it was a story to say Rome ought to burn in hell. Well, Constantine took that and made it theology. You understand what I'm saying? And when I spoke those words to you, I don't really know who I'm talking to and where you come from. I was afraid I was going to hurt you or make you angry. And so afterwards, I emailed Sandy, who's one of the most non-judgmental people I know, and I said, I need some feedback here. Do you think it was offensive to anybody? Because I hope I didn't hurt somebody. I thought it was important to say, to take the nets off your hearts. And she said, no. You know, you told about the research you did, and you also said that was your opinion. Other people didn't have to buy it if they didn't want to. She said, but I will tell you one thing. The last couple of sermons, when you've been talking about this, you're getting very angry. And I don't remember you that way 30 years ago. In fact, she said, I can quote this, I feel like I'm in the presence of a worrisome adult. You know, like Mary driving her school bus, taking a corner on two wheels or something. She didn't say that. That was my addition. It's good to be able to ask for help, because I wouldn't have known that. And I might have stayed on that track, and it wouldn't have been helpful. In fact, I was becoming, without knowing it, like the hellfire and damnation angry preachers that I was preaching against. Right? And that's why Jesus says, love your enemies, because if you don't, you got a good chance of becoming like them. You understand? Whatever it is you hate and you're angry about, if you get caught up in your anger, you will become like that person. That's the way it is. When the storms of life are raging, stand by me. When the nets in life's ocean get ramped around your heart, stand by me. And the way we stand by Him is by standing there for each other. We don't let people grow old without calling them on the phone and going to visit them. And we do that often. In this church, that must be our calling. Because there's people that need to come in with the sword of Christ and cut the nets off from around their hearts. You don't have to do anything heroic. You just have to show up.